Welcome to SIG Apps. This is the intro and deep dive session. So we have an hour and a half. And I think, so I'm going to start with an intro. So first of all, hands up, are you new to SIG Apps? Is this your first time? Okay, so we have a couple of new people. And who's been to SIG Apps before? Been to meetings? Cool. Recognize some faces. Sweet. So for the people who are new, I'm going to give a quick intro on basically what SIG Apps is, and then we'll just open it up for discussion. So if you have topics that you want to discuss, bring up, then we can do that. Okay, so my name is Adnan Abdulhussein. I am one of the co-chairs of SIG Apps. Janet is also here, and she's also one of the co-chairs. And then Kenneth Owens and Matt Farina are two other co-chairs. They weren't able to make it this KubeCon. I just realized I can't see the slides on the screen. Let me fix that. That's better. All right, so what do we do at SIG Apps? So SIG Apps is basically all about, it's a place where we can go and discuss how people develop and deploy and manage applications on top of Kubernetes. So there's kind of two parts of SIG Apps. One is kind of what we do in core, and I'll go over the Workloads API that we cover there. And then we have a few other sub-projects, like the application CRD controller, and I'll go over that as well. And then some other tools that have been grandfathered in, like Compose, that are still under the SIG Apps umbrella. And then the other part is essentially, as I said, kind of discussing how people are solving app development on Kubernetes and management. So often, we meet on Mondays at 9 a.m. Pacific time, and there we'll have demos of different tools in the ecosystem, and then we'll have discussions about the Workloads API, and then we'll have discussions about things like operators or CI/CD, stuff like that. So I mentioned the Workloads API. Hopefully you're familiar with some of these things. I won't go through all of them, but these are basically the APIs that we cover. And then the application CRD and controller is a new project that we've been working on. And the idea here is to basically define a common interface for applications on a Kubernetes cluster. So typically an application on a Kubernetes cluster isn't just one deployment. It could be a deployment, a config map, several other resources. And so the idea of the application CRD is to kind of group all these resources together and have one, essentially, metadata around what's part of an application. So this is a project that's in pretty heavy development right now. You can check it out. Here's a GitHub repo if you want to get involved there. And then, again, as I said, we love the ecosystem. The apps ecosystem is huge, and in our meetings, we'll have demos of various different projects. These are just some of the ones that we've had demoed before. So all of this is all relevant to apps as well. I don't have any more slides, I think. Oh, how to get involved. So yeah, so as I said, we meet on Mondays at 9 a.m. PST, and our Slack group is SIG Apps, and then we have a mailing list as well. So these are 3 different ways that you can get involved. So with that, I'm going to open it up to discussion here. I don't know if we need the mic, to be honest, because hoping I can just shout and we can all just talk. Maybe I do that. Okay, apparently I do need the mic. Okay, so I guess one way we could do this is there's only a couple of us in the room. Maybe we could go around and introduce each other. And then we can maybe bring up some topics that people want to discuss. Does that sound good? Starting with you, Janet.
Hi, I'm Janet. I'm co-chair of KubeCon and also co-chair of SIG Apps. So I'm a software engineer at Google, and I'm the project maintainer. And then I mostly work on the Workloads API. And over to you.
Hello, I'm Sarek, and I maintain a few Helm charts. And I'm not officially part of the SIG apps, but I'm interested into everything about deployments and applications over Kubernetes.
Hi, I'm Martin. I'm a software engineer at IBM. I'm a contributor and the maintainer for Helm, and I'm interested in getting involved with SIG apps.
Hi all, I'm Jake Laverne. I head up product management at DigitalOcean for developer experience, and we recently released our managed Kubernetes offering, and I'm interested in helping developers bring apps to DO.
Nice. So I'm Jasper. I'm a software engineer at Coolblue, an e-commerce company in the Netherlands. We are running 350 microservices, and I'm looking for new and better ways to ship it, and I'm very interested in it.
Alessandro, Microsoft engineer, CNCF ambassador. I know Adnan, so I wanted to be here, and I want to be helpful to the community for SIG apps. To introduce yourself, or not?
Hi, I am Jesus. I'm based in Barcelona, working for VMware. I am solution engineer and interested about SIG apps. It's my first time to attending that. Thank you.
Hi all, I'm Sema, DevOps engineer based in Paris. I'm a new contributor and I am interested in SIG apps.
Hi, I'm Joseph. I'm a infrastructure engineer at USwitch, which is a like energy broadband comparison site in the UK. I've done a little bit of work with SIG apps. I've been working on like the sidecar containers kept for the last year or so.
Hi, I'm Wayno. I'm from Microsoft, from Seattle. In my work, we interact with a lot of the developer on Kubernetes, focusing on Kubernetes, so I'm interested in learning more about the SIG app.
My name is Josip Zoric. I'm from Sinte from Norway. We're trying to see if we can use that for research and development projects.
Yeah, hi, I'm Christian Mattis from SAP. Yeah, SAP runs a lot of apps, not on Kubernetes yet, but yeah, I would be interested what's going on in this area.
Hi, my name is Mate. You probably saw my name or my GitHub handle when you were touching jobs or cron jobs. I authored them a couple years ago, so I'm trying to look at them if I have time.
Hi, I'm Malik. I'm from the UK, and I'm just here to find out about SIG apps.
Hey, my name is Vlad. I'm an engineer, and I'm just interested in SIG apps and see what happens.
Hi, I'm Simon Davison from Microsoft, Program Manager. Just here to understand what SIG apps is about, I guess.
Cool, I think there was... Thanks. Sorry, did you want to just...
So I'm Alex. I work at Pivotal. I work on migrating Cloud Foundry to use Kubernetes as scheduler. And I'm very interested in SIG apps because we basically run applications and we're interested in it's running perfectly.
Cool, okay. So I think what we can do now is just open up for discussion. I think, so we went over a few topics that we cover. Does anyone have any questions around that, like the application CRD, the workloads APIs, compose? Yes?
Just a question about the relationship
Sure. Oh, okay. Yeah, so the question is about the relationship between Helm and SIG Apps. So Helm was originally part of SIG Apps. So I'm just going to have you hold this so I don't have to carry on. So Helm was originally part of SIG Apps, and it was discussed there, and we used to have demos there. But as Helm graduated to become a CNCF project, it's kind of moved out of the SIG Apps umbrella. And so Helm has its own intro and deep dive already at KubeCon, so that's why we don't really discuss it here.
So there's the deep dive this afternoon at 24, 20, the last session. Yeah, I can't remember the time, sorry.
Yeah, I think it's, 4.
4:24.
Yeah, around 4 p.m.
Yeah, if you look at the schedule, or come over to finish.
Any other questions or topics? Joseph?
In regards to the application CRD, like what, I guess, are the intended use cases for it? Like something we have a problem with our company is we have a bajillion different microservices. It's often kind of hard to say what's an app, what's a service, and we're trying at the moment to almost catalog all our microservices and say, okay, these all belong to this service, this belongs to this app, and maybe then we can use things like OPA, for example, to do policy based on what service or app something belongs to. Is this something you're trying to solve with the application CRD?
I think some of that. So, and Janet, you might be able to speak more about the app CRD, but from my point of view, there's really no way to define and group resources of an application today. We agreed on some recommended labels. So there was the app dev working group, and one of the outputs of that was a set of recommended labels for applications, and that's kind of helped towards grouping applications. But I think the app CRD goes one step forward, and now I can do something like kubectl get applications, and I can see a representation of what's there inside my cluster. And then additionally, UIs like the Kubernetes dashboard or other UIs can then surface that as well. The app CRD does have a controller portion of it as well, and one of its main purposes is for garbage collection. So if you delete an application, then all of its resources get deleted as well. And then also having aggregated health checks, so having a status for the whole of the application, as opposed to having to drill down in the pods. Do you have anything to add to that, Janet?
Yeah, you basically covered everything. And also the metadata about the applications. For example, the icon of an app that you can use to show in the UI, or something like the who are the developers, and then the application version, and things like that.
Yeah, I just want to know what is the connection, or is there correlation between CoreOS Red Hat operator and the application CRD?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think the Red Hat folks have something called the Operation Lifecycle Manager, and that has a CRD to define the version and other metadata about the operator, or instances of an operator, I think. So there is some overlap with the application CRD, and I know there's an issue in that GitHub repo as well that kind of discusses the differences and whether there can be some sort of consolidation done there. Sorry? Yeah. Yeah, currently I don't think OLM uses the app CRD. So this issue was the one I was referring to. Yeah. Yeah. So another thing that we could do, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, just a quick question. So as far as I understand, this addresses an issue of managing applications inside a single cluster. What happens about applications that are spanning multiple clusters? Let's say users want higher availability and they want an instance of their app in US Central or US East or both. So do you have any plans to handle that?
I mean, definitely not handled today. I don't know if there are any plans to handle kind of federation in the future. Janet, do you know about that?
Well, it's not really about federated clusters, but rather sharded way to deploy applications.
Sorry, say that again?
It's more about sharded way to deploy applications, so multiple instances into standalone clusters that are not a part of Kubernetes Federation.
Okay, yeah. So one thing is that the app CRD and controller doesn't actually deploy anything. It's really just part of the CRD that you define in whatever tool that you're using to deploy already. And so right now that metadata doesn't include anything that would be deployed elsewhere. It's all just kind of in-cluster components.
Thank you.
But yeah, again, I don't know if maybe that's something that we could open an issue for and discuss, if that makes sense.
Hi, are there any plans to, or how does it work with the new Helm version? Since Helm has released a new alpha version 3, it has a built-in CRD maybe called Helm release.
Yeah.
How do you compare with the application CRD?
Yeah, so Helm added a new CRD called Helm Release CRD as part of Helm 3. And then I think there's a release version secret as well. So there's definitely overlap there. I think when I last talked with the Helm team, one idea that they had was, they didn't want to depend on the app CRD as it's something else that you'd have to install. But they are open to adding support for the app CRD in the future with maybe that can be enabled with a command line flag or whatever. So Helm can then generate the app CRD for whatever it's installing, as well as the Helm release that it uses. Any other questions on the app CRD?
So applications, especially in microservices world, often require a good identity framework to authenticate with each other. So that is the identity part of the application CRD policy, or?
Sorry, the question was about identity.
Yeah, the identity for the authenticating and authorization.
Yeah, not really. No, I think that would be solved by other tools, like Istio, for example. Yeah, again, the scope is to kind of just keep it just metadata and not try to do anything. Things like aggregated health checks and stuff kind of play into the metadata, being able to see the status of an application as a whole, but not kind of go beyond that and try to define how people should be deploying applications. So one thing we could do if people are interested is we could kind of have smaller breakout sessions. If some people are interested in just discussing the app CRD more, maybe we could break out and do that. I just want to make sure that we're covering what people actually want to discuss. Or if there's any other topics that you want to talk about as well. We have an hour, so. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I would like to understand something from the operator thing. So basically, the operator is about deploying things and managing them, okay? I'm a bit concerned about the first part. Let's say I have a cluster with some staging application and some production application. Both of them deploying, let's say, I don't know, a Postgres from a Postgres operator, okay? What if I upgrade the operator in the cluster, so it's okay on staging, but will it impact both staging and production? This case is not good, and in this case, I would need basically to deploy the operator with my application so that it deploys the Postgres only for the staging and then a separate operator for the production. So how do you feel about this? What do you think about this? Am I missing something, or is there an easy solution, or shouldn't the operator even try to deploy things and let's use a thing like this to deploy?
Yeah, no, I'm not sure. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? It's definitely one of the difficult problems, I think.
I would deal with that by running them in different clusters. That's already kind of used to do, but that's the way I would show it. This is kind of what I do in separate domains, in one operator in this case. Then I don't really care about the common part. I would get rid of it from the default.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'd also be concerned about RBAC in that case, right? I'd want to only give it the permissions it needs to deploy to a specific namespaces, right? But having to run multiple instances of the operators is not ideal.
For example, use controls for Prometheus operator. How it does this is it's packaging the operator with a single instance of Prometheus. It's making up one at a time. Single one maybe it's the way forward, maybe not. I think it's interesting business to see.
Yeah. Has anyone else run into this problem with running operators?
I'm afraid I don't fully understand the problem yet, but that's might be my lack of experience.
My point of view is that. Yeah, so my point of view is that I would like, for example, an application. Let's talk about my staging. I want to upgrade my operator, for example, only for that staging environment and not for the other ones. But if I deploy in a standard way the operator cluster-wide, it may impact other things as well. It will impact everything at once.
As far as I understand, you're looking into a way to split, like to reduce blast radius when you deploy staging and production. So the way we solved it, we have, like, internally we have multiple operators, one of them being, for instance, Elasticsearch operator. And the way we solved it is we just created a dedicated GKE cluster for staging, and it's completely like dedicated, like separate deployment pipelines, separate like Docker image build pipelines, etc.
Yeah, kind of agreeing with what you said, but like, or if you still wanted it to keep it in cluster, you could just have like a staging controller and a production controller. So at least then you're only managing two, and they should be somewhat mirroring their configuration, and just one's responsible for managing your staging and one's production. So that would give you at least some more confidence when you're upgrading them.
Any other thoughts on that? Any other topics that people want to bring up?
So, as I said, we migrating schedule to Kubernetes for Cloud Foundry, and one thing that I know, at least for me, it's like separating cluster admin from application developer, and like, I know, making sure that as a cluster admin, I don't care that much about user applications. Yeah, I know that they're running, but I know that they will manage it on their own, and if one developer will screw it up, it won't affect other developers. And for me, it seems that Kubernetes right now lacks some, maybe not that small, but like features that at least limit the user in their own namespace, and then like have some limit, especially for disk usage, because some people still write files on disk in container, and like disk quota and maybe some other small improvements. And is something like this, I know, is it part of this SIG? Is this like, I know, app developer experience? It's, I know, limiting app developer rights. Is this being topic of SIG Apps? Because I didn't follow it till up recent, and I said like, application CRD is great. It's nice usability, but I was thinking about like doing the other thing, like limiting app developer from preventing screwing up the cluster. Mm-hmm. So as app developer, I don't need to know anything about Kubernetes that much. Like, I develop my applications running. I'm happy.
I think it's somewhat related. I think what you're touching on there is kind of things like admission policies. I guess that could be done through other tools, like the Open Policy Agent, for example. But yeah, I think it can be related to, I guess, what other SIG would cover, like the policy, admission policy and stuff like that. SIG Auth, yeah, might be another one to look into.
So with the, in regards to like people's applications writing loads of data out, in 1.14 there was like requests and limits you can set on ephemeral storage, which is how much they'll be writing out to the the directories they get set. So you could have some kind of an admission webhook saying defaults for ephemeral storage to try and limit how much crazy stuff your developers write out.
To add to that, so we are running like thousands of applications, like on dozens of GKE clusters, and one of the solutions that we've incorporated was having a dedicated service, like an application database, where users define their requirements, and then we have an operator per GKE cluster that pulls that database that returns like a graph of the expected cluster state, and it provisions requests, limits, limit ranges, like resource quotas, whole 9 yards into each cluster.
That's really interesting. Is that something that you have published?
It's not open source.
Okay. Sounds pretty interesting, though. Does that kind of answer your question? Yeah. Any other topics or thoughts on that?
Actually, currently there is no standard rollout control knobs or status fields. For example, the status field in deployments, stable set, daemon set all differ maybe by a little bit, but you still have to write different logics to know whether or not the rollout has completed. So that in KubeController, KubeController release command, you use different logic for each workload. That works fine for limited standard workloads, but if you want to manage operators, that doesn't work. You cannot enumerate all those workloads. So currently, we are building some CRD that to give common controller knobs or status, such as replicas, updated replicas. But currently, it's still work in progress, and I'd like to get some feedbacks from the community and any is this a common problems? Yeah. And are there any other works here? Yeah.
This might actually be one thing that the app CRD can help solve because of the idea of the aggregated health check. So you can see an aggregated status of all the resources in the application.
So the application CRD, does it meant to do such kind of rollout controls? For example, you can pause a rollout or just to cancel a rollout or something like that?
It wouldn't do the rollout, but it would provide the status of the rollout across all the pods that relates to that application.
Yeah, that may relate to another question: is which is the granularity or the scope of the application? How large is the application? I'm not quite sure what is meant to. It may consist of all those deployments for maybe your own business, your business, or just a simple component in your systems.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and I think it's something that we're still trying to figure out because I think it could be, as you said, it could be like a fairly small service, or it could be one that's like really large and spans, maybe hundreds of different deployments. So that is obviously a problem when you're trying to calculate an aggregated health check because you don't know how big that thing is, right? Yeah. So yeah, that's still something I think that we'll need to work on. And I think there is an issue related to that, I think, in the repo.
Yeah, but I think the status checking of application CRD may works for if you want to check the rollout status, but if you want to control the rollout process of the operators, you're still missing some pieces here.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
For example, if you try to roll out stable sets, you can use the partition fields to control how much you like to update ports in in the first batch, and if you use the deployment, you can create multiple deployments, one for each deployment batches. But doesn't work, such kind of behavior differ across those workloads, and you don't have a common knobs, so that things like Spinnaker or other continuous delivery system, they don't have a consistent way to control all those workloads, especially for those operators, because they don't have a common set standards.
Do you know if there are any like standards on status for across workloads? Is there a plan for that, or is?
So Barney from SIG Apps, he's working on the application status. So he's working on the proposal to unify all the status across multiple workloads, APIs, and maybe other custom resources. And then for rollout strategy, it's not part of the application CRD. So that's up to the lower level workloads, API, or other custom resource or operator. So applications CRD is more for, this is my unit of deployment, this is what I want to show in my UI as an app, and then when I want to delete an app, that's the whole, a bundle of things that I want to be deleted together. And then also the healthiness of my app, I can get it from the application CRD.
What might be cool, but probably not really related, is that what I sometimes figure out within our company is that we have several servers who are dependent on each other. And you were talking about an aggregated health check. It would also be cool if it would be possible to relate or denote dependencies or whatsoever in a similar way. So in case you're cleaning up an application, you also know there is dependence, which can also be removed or something like that. And this also relates to the health check, because then you can immediately dig deeper in what kind of application in the end is causing some challenges. How do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think maybe you can answer that as well.
So I think dependency management is something that we are thinking about. So it's still work in progress, but we are tackling the application status first, and then.
Yeah, I think the idea was to have some sort of loose dependency definition, though, and not tightly coupled. But I think the status could also extend to that, to checking dependencies and seeing if they're healthy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think you could hook the application CRD health checks into pod readiness gates? So, for example, if I had a pod in a different application that is highly dependent on this other application, we could use the new pod readiness gates to say, oh, this app's down because its aggregated health check's dead, so therefore I'm not ready, which is a kind of loose coupling, I guess, of applications in that regard.
It's an interesting idea. I feel like it might be out of scope for the pod itself, though. I mean, I guess one way for, if one pod depends on another, I guess, you know, for example, if it's a database, right? So in order to spin up an application, you need to connect to a database. If that database isn't yet ready, then that application should just fail. So like the container should just fail in that case and then restart and keep trying until the database is ready. Maybe that's one way that the status of that pod then reflects the dependency on the database. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I was kind of more thinking in the regards of like, if I have a load of interconnected services and I've got and one service just goes down completely, and I've got this service which shouldn't serve traffic anymore because actually it's just going to fail requests or something because it's going to try and talk to some service that's non-existent. Like in that case, maybe I could leverage the pod readiness gates to say these pods are actually no longer ready because this application over here has gone down, and by using the kind of aggregated application CRD health check as a way of hooking those together.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess today that would just be done with a readiness probe that then that application needs to know about its dependencies and checks them as part of that readiness probe. But if there's a way to extract that to the app CRD, yeah, that's an interesting idea. I don't think we've thought about that before. But yeah, maybe we could open an issue on that. And
yeah, I was just wondering. I know it seems it's easier if you can stop the developers having to handle that sometimes than trying to code in every scenario and how to deal with it. If we could just use a more Kubernetes-y way to do it, maybe.
Yeah, I agree.
Do you think it's something you can do right now by doing like a shell out on readiness probe of like application A, a shell out to curl that would ping an endpoint, readiness endpoint on application B?
I mean, yeah, that might potentially work. I mean, you could just have a like readiness probe, which is exec kubectl, get status, grep ready kind of thing if you wanted to. But it's a bit ugly, and it also removes the like readiness of your own application, because then you're only finding out the readiness of a different app. So like if I start up and I just fail, I would potentially come up as ready because the other apps are okay, but I'm not.
Well, since it's a shell out, you could probably concat two curls with ampersands, something like that. Overall, from my experience, I would rather encourage users to add circuit breakers and handle failures instead of like doing this chain of handling this chain of failures.
Any other thoughts related to that, or any other topics? So I think we have about 40 minutes left, but we can also break early if no one has anything else they'd like to bring up. Does anyone have any questions about SIG Apps, how they can get involved? I know there's a few new folks here, so feel free to.
I'm definitely interested to learn a little bit more about that. It's super new.
Okay. All well. So these would be a good place to start. So the app CRD is just one sub-project of applications. As I said, we also cover the Workloads Api, so everything from deployments to stateful sets, order sets, and then cron jobs and jobs. Yeah, so if you want to get involved in development of the core, well, Janet, you might be able to talk about how people can get involved in core more.
So you can just go to GitHub and then search for the issues with the SIG Apps label. Yeah. And then look at the ones that you're interested to learn. And I think, do we have the first, good for first label for
the
that?
good first issue? Yeah.
Yeah.
Not in SIG Apps, apparently.
Not currently, but...
If you're interested in contributing to SIG Apps overall, and the controllers most importantly, there are a couple places depending on the level of knowledge that you have. So if you're completely newbie, you don't know nothing about the controllers, we have something that is called sample controller. It's part of the main Kubernetes repo. It's very minimalistic, and actually whether you're interested in writing operator, a controller for CRD, stuff like that, there's a sample controller. It's part of the staging repo, but we also published that one. It's very minimalistic. It presents the flow of requests, how a proper controller should look like. And you can play with it and see more or less, I don't know, like 100 lines of code or something like that. It sets up the main pieces. I'm going to put a nasty commercial of myself. I did 2 talks where I was presenting how to write controllers for Kubernetes. I'm now describing the things that are needed for every controller that you'll see on the slide, which is what are listers and informers for and why you should be using them. In short, they are caches for getting the resources instead of always live hitting the server, which is very important and crucial for every controller. Once you are familiar with the basic controller pattern, then you can actually start looking into the issues. Some issues, yeah, we kind of suck on naming the first-time issues, but on the other hand, the majority of the simple issues we probably already fixed by now. That's the other problem. The controllers are pretty stable, and the majority of issues are for solving a particular case that someone is having with controllers and around environment that he's working on. Although I'm pretty sure that there will be some reasonable issues for first-timers. Like I said, this is, like I would call, the holy Bible of any controller writer, because you want to get the general gist. And this is the minimal possible use case. And what is also important, this is part of the main Kubernetes repo. So we do ensure that this is up to date all the time. So once you're familiar with this, you can pretty much get the gist of any other controller. And that will be slightly more involving with regards what you're touching. There's one controller that I wrote that doesn't follow this. I admit it. We work hard on fixing that one. That's the cron job. The good thing, although when I was talking with one of people in Seattle, was that the cron job controller is the simplest to get the gist, because it literally uses the live API calls to the server to get the data. But the downside, it is very heavy. So we are working hard on rewriting the cron job controller over to use the shared informers. But like I said, that's not an easy issue. It's a big step that we'll be undertaking over the next couple of releases, most probably.
Thanks, Maciej. That's a good shout, yeah.
And also, if you go to the community repo, yeah. Yeah, you can find the docs for how to contribute, like set up the local development environment and the
I think there's a section development at the top.
Contributors.
That one. Yeah. Yeah.
Guide? Or?
I can't remember exactly. I do have some links somewhere.
Yeah.
But yes.
And also the controller conventions, API conventions.
Yeah, also.
Coding conventions.
Yeah.
Coding conventions more than API conventions. API conventions are more for people that are developing API or reviewing or actually approving those PRs. So that's more for them. What you will be interested in is coding. The overall coding conventions for, I don't know, naming stuff, naming packages, naming methods, and what are the practices that we have around writing controllers.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can create something called CAP. It's Kubernetes Enhancement Proposal for new features. For example, we recently have the sidecar CAP for improving the sidecar.
We're working on the CAP for cron jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the caps go in the enhancement repo. So you can find out how to contribute that here. And you can also provide feedback on caps that are coming in as well. So if you wanted to see the caps related to SIG apps, so one thing is that you'll find them inside this directory here. And then new caps that are being proposed will also be in the pull requests. Does that all help? Cool. Any other topics we want to bring up? We can also we have half an hour left. We can break early as well. Sounds like there's no other questions. I mean, we're around for a bit, so if you have any questions, you can just ask us. Thanks a lot.